Thank you very much, and good morning. Thank you for the introduction. And a particular note of gratitude to Dr. Mazway and CSID for the opportunity to be with you here today and participate in this wonderful conference, a very important conference. So why Uzbekistan? It's not a country that has ever had a free and fair election, as judged by the OSCE or other election observers who value free and fair elections. It's not a country that is particularly known for democratic transformation. It's a country that has been authoritarian since its independence. So what makes this a topic of discussion at a conference such as this, particularly a country relatively far afield from the region that we're talking about today? Well, I would state, first of all, that this is a country that is 96% Muslim according to state statistics. It's a population of 35.6 million in the heart of Central Asia. There are 2,040 official mosques in Uzbekistan and 9,361 mahallas, each serving between 500 to 10,000 residents. And critically, it has a population under age 24, constituting 40% of the country's population and growing. If you take that up to age 30, it's an even higher percentage, nearly 50%. So a very young and upcoming country with demands of a growing youth population. I would start in the argument discussion of Uzbekistan's seeming transformation or ambitions to become democratic by noting several of points in its recent history. But I would also say that this is not a country that has undergone a color revolution. There was no Tashkent Spring to speak of. But there is a desire among the leadership and the population of Uzbekistan to break from its post-Soviet authoritarian condition and its past and develop into a modern people's state that is economically viable, that is certainly located in a critical part of the world, a crossroads on the Silk Road, and one that values human rights above all and aspires to create a new Uzbekistan or a people's state. And in that vein, since the passing of Islam Karimov in 2016, the new president, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, has instituted numerous national development strategies that have attempted to address the shortcomings of the Uzbek state since inception, particularly looking at its economic viability, development of trade routes, development of a tolerant attitude towards religion, and an independent identity that breaks from its past as a Soviet socialist republic. There have been numerous achievements made through the various state strategies. The one initially instituted in 2017 after Mr. Mirziyoyev's first election, and his second five-year strategy, which was billed as the building of the people's state under a new Uzbekistan. While mainly these achievements appeared to be economically oriented in developing a series of reforms in the judicial sector, addressing the embedded and rampant state of corruption in Uzbekistan. They also touched upon building human person-to-person development, creating a socially responsible state that puts the people out in front and not the government or local officials, trying to build in decision-making at all levels and a responsible mindset among a civically inclined people. Well, the institution of these reforms, of course, as you would imagine, differs from the reality on the ground. Nonetheless, to continue advancing the reforms, under the president's leadership in 2023, there was a major rewriting of the Constitution which included the recommendations of 220,000 individual recommendations by citizens of the country on what they would like to see change, what they would like to see done differently as part of the national constitution. The idea of a constitutional referendum is not necessarily a positive one in the post-Soviet lexicon. Nonetheless, they proceeded with a referendum that, of course, passed. And while many of the really positive ideas about building citizenship and invigorating the civic and political culture in Uzbekistan were in that set of changes, they were perhaps overlooked because of what came to be viewed in the West as the key negatives in this process, and those being the extension of the president's term from 5 to 7 years and the ability to serve 2 new terms in office. Again, a stratagem often used by the authoritarian leaders of the post-Soviet states. Now, this, of course, was accompanied by a snap presidential election, which Mr. Mirziyoyev prevailed in. And that brings us to today. We have in Uzbekistan a set of reforms outlined by the various national strategies, and now the launch of the Uzbekistan 2030 strategy, which foresees within the next 6 years to build a modern state that is, again, economically viable, that integrates with its neighbors peacefully, that is a regional hegemon within Central Asia, and can stand up to the heavyweights in the region that, with whom it both cooperates and competes, that being, of course, China, the Russian Federation, and to a degree Turkey, who it does see as a model of development to some degree. I would add one of the big ambitions of this set of reforms is to reform the state of the mahallas, the local community committees that really guide and govern people's everyday lives in Uzbekistan. Not a unique phenomenon to the country, but one that is part of its identity, part of its brand, that can, in fact, be a source of grassroots development of democratic ideals, while also being a source of day-to-day law and guidelines and principles by which people live their lives. Now, there are several, and I'll get to these quickly, internal pressure points that need to be taken into account during this project, which is now, as Mr. Mirziyoyev is in his 8th year of power, are becoming more intense. And one is the strict control of religious expression. Uzbekistan has never been a country that has been seen, even with the recent reforms, as particularly tolerant of religious expression. There is a state religion, state-approved mosques. There a certain view of Islam that must be followed. There is an intolerance for what it sees as diversions from that path. For example, any act that may be seen as part of civil disobedience, but are related back to challenges of a radicalized nature, as seen in Andijan in 2004. And of recent vintage, the Crocus City Hall massacres in Moscow, which had a repercussion in Uzbekistan, whereby the passports of imams were seized lest they travel abroad or lest they be involved somehow in radicalizing populations. There were no Uzbeks who were implicated in the attack, but pressure was put on by the government to assure that there would be no future activities by ethnic Uzbeks following suit. As we know, there were some 4,000 Uzbeks who had participated in ISIS in Syria. There are also fallout from the constitutional reform process in the early elections, including the lack of an ability for citizens to monitor those elections as domestic observers. We have a very difficult situation with respect to civil society. There are few truly independent civil society organizations, and what we have is the prevalence of government-organized NGOs, who are in many ways also funded and well-resourced. As mentioned, a growing youth population with rising expectations for their ability to earn a living and build their country and not have to leave as labor migrants to countries such as Russia, Turkey, Middle East, or Southeast Asia. But yet a growing economic inequality and still the persistence of labor migration outside of the country. External pressure points, first and foremost, relations with the Russian Federation, which still wields a very large influence over the country, as Uzbekistan tries to appease both the Russians as well as the West in dealing with economic sanctions put upon Russia. Uzbekistan had been envisioned by Moscow as a potential transit point. They have tried to address this, yet keep good relations. Uzbekistan is not a member of Russian-led organizations such as the CSTO or the Eurasian Economic Union, nonetheless must maintain good relations, given the thousands of Uzbek citizens working in that country as labor migrants. We have increased engagement with the West as Uzbekistan wants to reinvent itself as a democratic engine, economic engine within Central Asia, yet declining democratic credentials, even with the advent of these national strategies and these efforts to build committees and institutions within Uzbekistan that put people ahead of the government. And the country's vision of itself as a regional organizer of peace and security within the region, which also includes a shared border with Afghanistan, which has caused the Tashkent leadership some degree of discomfort in addition. So, what is the future for democracy in Uzbekistan with all of these many factors in consideration? I have a few recommendations, both for the authorities in Uzbekistan in building democracy, as well as for those who are on the outside supporting democratic development in Uzbekistan. I'll go very quickly through these. You can see them. First is providing a mandate for sequential civic education for young people at all levels of school in the country. Building civic culture, building a culture of democracy from the ground up is imperative. It is lacking in the country. It is imperative for any successful democracy to take root in Uzbekistan. Opening the political space and allowing political parties to register. We have the same five political parties in the Oli Majlis that we had during the last election. New parties have not only been not allowed to be registered, they have been blacklisted in many ways, with their members beaten, tortured, intimidated. That would include also expediting direct local elections to hakims, loosening restrictions on the activities of civil society, who are heavily regulated by the Ministry of Justice and do wonderful work, but are impeded in doing so by the heavy hand of the ministry. And also clarifying the role of mahallas, which can serve, in fact, in a very positive manner in both in the election process, but also in promoting and strengthening the equal rights of citizens, particularly women, and promoting civic resilience. One recent and important reform was the appointment to the mahallas of a person dealing with gender equality issues. Let's see how this plays out. Hopefully this will reinvigorate and allow more opportunities for women. And for those in the West, the US and Europe, who are supporting democracy, hold this government accountable to the points it has committed itself to in the National Development Strategy, in front of the United Nations and the international community, particularly concerning human rights. Press for democratic development and equal opportunities to expand trade relations and bilateral relations and person-to-person contact. Invest in Uzbekistan's youth and make civic and legal education a priority. View the human dimension in Uzbekistan through an intersectional lens, and provide assistance to those doubly marginalized groups, including women with disabilities and young people in minority communities. Very critically, provide training for investigative journalism, particularly young women journalists, as the media sector continues, unfortunately, under this government to contract in spite of recent promises. And of course, support the work of independent non-governmental organizations in spite of the enormous pressures they face. They're doing good work. They need our support, because democracy is not a top-down process. It's a grassroots, bottom-up process in concert with a government that is not only willing, is not only stated its desire to institute reform, but is showing the political will to do so. Thank you very much.